Whoops, I might have hit the wrong button. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Morning. I see a Steve and a Jamie and a Ms. Red Badger. Good morning, people. Looks like there's a few people watching. And do I have a Cameron? Oh, there he is. I'll switch that to rock and roll. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping up front because Steve said, "Oh, neat, new intro screen." Slightly new. It's basically the same thing, and I threw some text on the bottom that says live stream starting soon, so that people don't get too antsy just staring at the logo animation. And part of that is I'm trying to do a couple of different things to increase our retention numbers on the live stream after it posts. So for those of you like Steve and you too, Cameron, if you find that you have a little bit of spare time, you have access to go into the channel and make changes. And I can give you better instructions on how to do this if you get a chance. Basically, you can go into editing the title description and you just add a line that says something like intro and put a timestamp next to it, and that will actually, not only does that give a timestamp that a person can click on, but it'll actually, the algorithm picks that up and adds a little demarcation on the timeline bar at the bottom of the completed video. So if people want to skip the intro, they can just click ahead to that little demarcation. I'm going to spend some time in the next few days doing that to our most recent videos, and I'll just get them as I have time to do it. Along with that, guys, those of you that are part of the team and have access to do it, any videos that you feel comfortable going back and rewatching, if you want to make marks like that, you know, like topic blah, you know, is at timestamp X, then again it'll show the topic mark in the description, and it will make the demarcation on the timeline. So that'll help the channel out a great deal for the boys that have the capacity to do that. I'll bring it up to Patrick and them too. So, how you doing this morning, Cameron?
Man, I'm good. I've missed doing Thursdays. It just and I realize we're not doing a Toter Win this morning, but I've still missed Toter Win Thursday. And
no, but hopefully this is a prelude to a Toter Win. So let's go ahead and dig in a little bit. Here is what's happening. The hashtag Indict Trump has been trending this morning. Let's see. Right now it's up to... see if I can see where the trend is. Oh, well, it's slipped off the trending list. But the hashtag Indict Trump was trending this morning with well over 60 or 70,000 tweets. And it's funny. Let's take a quick peek-see here. This guy, Andrew Wertman, quotes 26 USC 7201. It's funny that he chose this particular code to quote. Any person who willfully attempts to evade or defeat any tax imposed by this title or the payment thereof shall be guilty of a felony and shall be fined $100,000, $500,000 for corporations, imprisoned for 5 years, or both. I would like to point out that Al Sharpton is still free. But also, let's talk a little bit.
That doesn't mean anything. Remember that fuckstick Timothy Geithner?
Yeah.
I mean, golly.
I'm going to switch the screen share on you real quick, Cameron, just to add the computer audio so you can hear this. He shared this guy shared this video, and the video is being shared a lot on Twitter right now. It's a minute and a half long. We're going to take a look at it.
I know how the tax code works better than anyone.
Nobody
Can you hear that, Cameron?
Yes.
knows the tax code better than I do, okay? I know it better. I'm the king of the tax code.
I know more formulas. I know more about tax abatements. I know more about taxes than any human being that God ever created. I knew how to use the tax code to rebuild my company. when others didn't have a clue.
You work very hard to pay the least amount of taxes?
Yeah, I want to pay the least amount possible. I don't want to pay tax.
He didn't pay any federal income tax. So
That makes me smart. See, I understand the tax code better than anybody that's ever run for president.
Former President Donald Trump's company, along with the organization's longtime chief financial officer, have been indicted on charges which involve tax-related crimes.
You used an apartment because you need an apartment because you have to travel too far where your house is. You didn't pay tax.
$1.7 million over 16 years. Not much.
Or education for your grandchildren.
Paid for his grandkids' private school in New York City. My dad did that because he's a good guy.
Well, these are employment perks. These are.
I don't even know. Do you have to? But does anybody know the answer to that stuff?
I know how the tax code works better than anyone.
They indict people for that.
And it ends, it says case closed. Really? You didn't make a case. You nattering. Okay. So here's the thing. That code that this guy quotes, any person who willfully attempts to evade or defeat any tax imposed by this title. Think back to the 2016 election. Right? Think back to the campaign.
That makes me smart.
Trump actually made it a point to say things like, hey, if you pay more than you have to in taxes, you're an idiot. And he also pointed, which I agree with entirely, because let's not forget, taxation is theft. There are no taxes that you pay involuntarily that do not involve the threat of force. Right? Income tax, property tax, that's somebody pointing a gun at you and taking your money away. In every circumstance without exception. Even if you want to pay the tax, you don't have the legal option to choose not to. Which means even if it's a thing that you want to do, it is being done to you involuntarily. Democrats are not interested in consent unless it's politically useful. Right? So when you're talking about the tax violations that they're alleging here, what they're, and actually I'll pull it up real quick. I've got that too because I don't screw around with this stuff. Here's the indictment, right? Here's the actual freaking indictment. And we're not going to read it line for line. If you want to have somebody read the whole thing to you, go talk to Viva Fry. He covers this too. It's clearly a political indictment, right? The indictment alleges that Weaselberg, Trump's CFO, who gets paid $540,000 a year plus $400,000 in annual bonuses, is evading taxes by receiving educational benefits. By receiving educational benefits for some of his children, carrying a company expense account, and having a separate apartment that's paid for by the company for travel purposes. There's a couple of other allegations in there. Apparently, the apartment was furnished, and so there's furniture and televisions in the apartment, and they're saying that should have been reported as direct income, and that since it wasn't reported as direct, shut up. Okay, I seem to recall negotiating a compensation package for myself that included a paid education. So, am I to understand here that I should owe income tax on the monetary value and or cost of the use of my post 9/11 GI Bill after having left the U.S. Army? No, because that's not how a compensation package works. You idiots.
Play of that, just, again, God, there are so many things I miss about Trump, but the section where Hillary's like, and he paid no income tax, and that makes me smart. I mean, God, I miss Trump. I do. And I miss him for things like that.
Well, I saw a tweet from Bernie Sanders the other day, something about how Amazon paid zero in federal taxes.
Federal income taxes, yes.
In federal income taxes. And what Bernie said was he paid zero in taxes. That's a lie. right? Amazon paid billions in taxes. Now, they paid zero in federal corporate taxes, and Trump talked about this too. He pointed out, hey, the tax code says that you can take all these deductions. You can deduct X, Y, and Z. Okay, so if at the end of the year, I know that I'm going to have to pay $10,000 in taxes, but the law allows me to deduct whatever I spend on equipment for my business, I'm going to go buy a $10,000 camera. Right? That's not complicated. If I get to the end of the year and I know I have to pay X in taxes, and there's a qualifier there, unless you go get a new pickup truck and slap the business logo on the side of it, Daddy's rolling up in a new F-150.
Well, and the thing is, all of us, every single one of us, pays the minimum in tax that we can get away with. The vast majority of us do that legally. Some people do it illegally. But all of us, every single one of us, writes off every damn thing we can write off, because it would just be stupid not to. And you know what this really speaks to? And this is one of the things that just makes me bash my face into brick walls that you can't make leftoids understand. The tax code is unfair. The tax code is unfair. The tax code is unfair. Actually, I agree. The tax code is ridiculously unfair. So what we do is we get rid of the Marxist-inspired progressive tax code. We get rid of the progressive tax code. We get rid of the ability to write off all these deductions, and you're allowed to spend this over here and then write it off over there. That's not something guys like you and I can do. Well, I'm sure we could do it on very small scales, but the kind of things that Trump would do, or guys like Bernie Sanders, you can only do that if you've got a ton of money.
Right. Well, let's say, most Americans who are making between, say, $50,000 and $80,000 a year.
Hey, can I have the chat back?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
But most Americans between 50 and 80.
Most Americans making between $50,000 and $80,000 a year, say, if they were suddenly to start earning significantly more than that, it would have to be significantly more than that for them to keep the difference. You go from, say, $60,000 a year to $120,000 a year, and by the time the taxes shake out, you're only bringing home maybe $10,000 more than you were, because you've changed the tax bracket so dramatically. Unless, of course, you've also had a similar change in your amount of deductible liabilities. But the tax code as it exists is designed to prevent you from increasing your actual income. It's explicitly designed to prevent you from improving yourself. We've talked a little bit on this show about the fair tax versus the flat tax. And I oppose the flat tax for one of the same many reasons that I oppose the regular income tax. It's just flatly unconstitutional. Now, stay with me. Prior to an amendment to the Constitution to create the IRS and the income tax, a scheme like the income tax scheme was already unconstitutional. Once that was created, it was constitutional to the extent that the Constitution had been amended to do away with the prohibition on collecting taxes in that way. Before the amendment to implement the IRS, which was overseen by Woodrow Wilson, the federal government was only allowed to collect revenue through tariffs. But something people forget, now that we've got an IRS and a federal income tax, which we've been suffering under for 100 years now, and to our exclusive detriment, there have been no measurable benefits from the implementation of the income tax, period. But so you do away with constitutional prohibition on stealing money from people at gunpoint. You didn't do away with the Fourth Amendment, which says that I'm supposed to be secure in my person's properties and papers. So annually, without a warrant or due cause, and due cause, just cause, right, involves reasonable suspicion There's an implied element there. Reasonable suspicion of a crime. Earning income is not a crime. So forcing me to open my books in order to decide how much of my money you get to want at gunpoint is an explicit violation of my Fourth Amendment protection to be secure with my person, property, and papers. That's ludicrous. There's a good argument that it's also a violation of the Fifth Amendment, but that's another argument. So the indictment on the face of it is political in nature. They're going after somebody for a common practice. They're trying to make the argument that this common practice, which is supported by the law, can somehow be redefined to a thing that is prohibited by the law without having to alter the definition of the law such that it would punish the rest of the known world which is engaged in similar activity.
Well, hell, I have an expense account. I put $49 worth of gas in my work truck this morning with that expense account. Like, it is such a common practice in business to act like the fact that you get benefits above and beyond what comes on your paycheck.
Yep.
It's ludicrous.
Yeah, and under the arguments of this indictment, that means that you now owe the government $24.50 in taxes. Because that expense account amounts to income, and you spent it on gas. So, I mean, you're trying. I understand that my senators and my congressmen are paying for all of their travel out of their annual salary.
No, of course not.
No, besides, obviously not.
Even if the CFO is guilty as hell, that doesn't mean Trump did anything. That means the CFO is guilty. There are people that work their way into positions of power in corporations all the time, and they commit crimes while they're in those positions of power in large corporations. Those people go to jail. It doesn't mean that everybody associated with the corporation goes to jail. You couldn't do business if that was the case.
Right.
Nobody would ever hire anybody, because if I hire you and you do something illegal and now I got to go to jail, I'm just not going to hire anybody.
Yeah, do we get to go and pick out the owners of major sports franchises and point out the men that they have in their organization that have assaulted women in elevators on camera and say, yep, the whole board is going to jail for the next 5 to 10 years? Is that how things work now? But
yeah, and it's all so convenient that here we are. Okay, Trump's actually joining the lawsuit to go after Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to get to next.
Yeah, and then the thing that trends is not that, but instead what trends is indict Trump. And that's not suspicious at all. And Jeffrey Epstein totally killed himself.
Yeah, here's an article from yesterday. Former President Donald Trump, this is from The Blaze. I like The Blaze more or less, so I don't archive The Blaze. Former President Donald Trump announced class action lawsuits Wednesday against Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, and Google CEO Sundar Pichai, the leaders of 3 big tech companies that banned him from their platforms after the January 6th. I cannot believe they're using the word riot here. I mean, it's better than insurrection, but come on, guys. It wasn't even a riot. Just shut up your noses with all that. Come on, Glenn, you're better than that. Or at least I thought you were. Speaking at a news conference at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, Wednesday morning, Trump said he would be the lead plaintiff in the class action suit filed in partnership with the America First Policy Institute, a new nonprofit think tank that advocates for Trump policies. The lawsuit was filed in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. I stand before you this morning to announce a very important and very beautiful, I think, development for our freedom and our freedom of speech. Today, in conjunction with the America First Policy Institute, I'm filing as the lead class action representative a major class action lawsuit against the big tech giants, including Facebook, Google, and Twitter, as well as their CEOs, Trump said. So, I want to pop over real quick. this comes back to hashtag indict Trump being the trending headline. Let's just take a peek. We'll go outside of the U.S. for a minute. How much to fake a trend on Twitter? About 150 pounds, which is like $200. A BBC investigation has found that companies in Saudi Arabia are offering to artificially boost the popularity of hashtags to make them trend on Twitter in contravention of the social media network's rules. The price to get automated bot accounts to make a hashtag trend for a few hours is around $200. It was an odd topic for people to suddenly be talking about. In early December, a phrase which roughly translates as grilled lamb delivery was a top trending phrase on Twitter in Saudi Arabia. Nearly 17,000 tweets mentioned the phrase, most of them promoting just one restaurant and listing its phone number.
I want grilled lamb delivered. That sounds amazing.
Are you kidding? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to come up the street on a towed little trailer that's got a little bonfire on it and the spit, right? A little guy on a bicycle or a moped. Yeah, it's a slight angle, and he's got the big sharp knife. He just shaves off the thin pieces onto a gyro. Dude, the Euro Bell. I want to listen to my keyhole for the Euro Bell. It's right up there with the taco truck that plays La Cucaracha as it drives around the neighborhood. Please. In fact, I'd run out the door for a fried chicken truck playing the Dukes of Hazzard theme. I'd have my large caliber pistol belt on, but instead of a big ass gun, it'd be a one quart bottle of hot sauce. Yeah, let's do this. But okay, so yeah, this happens in a shitty country like Saudi Arabia. Oh wait, what's that? Oh, how hackers have manipulated Twitter trending algorithm for years. Oh, hackers are doing it. But wait, there's more! Earlier this month, Netflix released a documentary titled Social Media Dilemma, Manipulation and Alteration of Society by Big Tech. Featuring former insiders from big tech and social media platforms, the documentary is an expose of the ways a handful of tech designers exert control over the way billions of us think, act, and live our lives, according to the official website for the film. Sorry, headphone users. Sometimes I get excited. The film begins by listing the credentials and bona fides of the people who, in their interviews, lay out the evidence that big tech companies, including social media platforms, used by billions around the globe, control, manipulate, polarize, distract, and divide users they promise to connect, all while monetizing those users. The panel includes those who have been employed by Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, Apple, Twitter, Palm, Mozilla, and Pinterest. Some of these former big tech employees worked near the top of the organizational charts at the companies where they were employed. A senior vice president of engineering at Twitter, a president of Pinterest, who was also a director of monetization at Facebook, a head of development and head of consumer product at Twitter, and a co-inventor of Google Drive, Gmail Chat, Facebook Pages, and the ubiquitous Facebook like button. Right? One interviewee, Tim Kendall, whose resume includes being a former executive at Facebook, made the point that while tech has made many lives better and richer by reuniting lost family members, finding organ donors, and making meaningful systemic changes, the fact remains that many of the people who helped develop the platforms that brought about those positive things were naive about the flip side of that coin. So these guys are going to go on to make the argument that this is all very scary because we manipulated people for the greater good, but you need to understand that means that the scary white supremacists could do the same thing, except they're not.
Yeah, that's where the perception of the whole white supremacist thing comes from, is this kind of manipulation.
Correct.
It's fascinating to me to watch. Like 6 months ago, okay, nobody, because I follow a lot of leftist stuff online, nobody was saying a thing about critical race theory. Nobody. Now it's everywhere. It's almost like it was artificially manipulated. And as if this doesn't have very real serious impacts, let's look at this another way. The way the Hunter Biden story with the laptop was suppressed and all of the dirty, dirty shit that was on that laptop, it is absolutely no accident that that was not allowed on Twitter or Facebook because, well, gosh, it was obtained illegally. Yeah.
And now we've had some more photos leak off of that laptop, by the way, that have placed Joe Biden directly with the business associates of Hunter Biden's, whom Joe said explicitly on the campaign trail that he had never encountered at all, never even met. Essentially, the current president of the United States of America, quite distinctly from clearly suffering from late onset dementia, is also implicated directly in the drug use, drug abuse, and child sex trafficking that his son has clearly engaged in, as evidenced by the many, many communications on that laptop, not just the several arrests on his record for similar conduct. So that's huge. And so let's take a look at this. This is from last year, from November 24th of last year. I am not making any claims about
2020 was the most free
2020 was the most fair and secure election ever.
Best election ever of all time. I mean, seriously, is Jesus Christ going to come back? Because that's the only thing that can top the 2020 election.
But according to Dr. Epstein, which is funny because this Dr. Epstein actually has not killed himself yet. This Dr. Epstein has been very vocal that he is a Hillary Clinton supporter. He voted for Hillary in 2016, but in 2016 he also testified, and then again in 2020, about Google and social media and their manipulation of the election process, right? This is not a claim about any kind of election fraud or any need of audits or any of that stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. This is a claim by a scientist who has done mountains of research on the subject that Google, especially Google, he says, first of all, we had 733 field agents in 3 key good places, I'll just say, Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida, and we preserved more than 500,000 ephemeral experiences. That's about 30 times more data than we got in 2016. Google search results were strongly biased in favor of liberals and Democrats. This was not true on Bing or Yahoo. The bias was being shown to pretty much every demographic group we looked at, including conservatives. Conservatives got slightly more bias in their search results than liberals did. How do you account for that? We also found what seems to be a smoking gun. That is, we found a period of days when the vote reminder on Google's homepage was being sent only to liberals. Not one of our conservative field agents received a vote reminder during those days. Epstein says that Google backed off after he went public with his findings. They literally shut off that manipulation that night, and so for 4 days before the election, they were finally showing vote reminders to everyone. The bottom line at the moment is that these manipulations, the ones that we've so far quantified, could easily have shifted at least 6 million votes in just one direction. That's the bare minimum at this point that I'm confident in. The maximum, we haven't begun to estimate that yet because we have so much data to look at. So, this guy wanted Hillary to win. This is like when the Army studied intelligence quotients exams because they really wanted to be able to hire dumber and dumber people. And they came to the conclusion that anybody with an intelligence quotient with an IQ of less than 85 cannot be trained to be productively useful in any capacity in the armed services. Right? You have to have an IQ of 85 or higher to join the Army, to join any military service. And
but what you want to be true doesn't mean that it's true.
Correct. See, the Army would have preferred that a larger swath of the population be eligible to serve. But that's not the conclusion they came to. Right? Just like the studies on gender difference in gender equal policy nations, the scientists that went to study that expected that what they would prove is that if you do all this woke stuff and all these extra basically gender-based affirmative action type policies, anything that you could do in the government and by policy and by social norms, that you would see men and women start to be more and more the same, because there wouldn't be anything in the society or in the law shoving them into different boxes. And what they actually found was absolutely the opposite. The more policy, the more freedom people have to make choices, and the less social interference there is with the things that people are allowed to choose, the more different, the more extreme the differences between the genders. So they found that in especially the Scandinavian countries, to an even greater degree than in any other country where there's less diversity policy in place, more men went to be doctors, like voluntarily entered into the field, and more women went to be nurses. And there are a lot of factors that affect that, largely personal preference. So
long story short, Dr. Epstein did not want to conclude that people may have been manipulated into voting for Hillary, but he looked at the data and had no choice but to come to that conclusion.
Yep, he would have preferred that the opposite. In fact, from his testimony, basically what he was hoping to prove is that the internet had conned people into voting for Donald Trump, and that's not what the data showed. So, hey, big ups to this guy for coming out and saying, nope, I'm sorry, guys, it's not what I wanted to find, but this is what we found.
Yeah. You don't ever want the diagnosis of cancer, but if you have cancer, you want the diagnosis as soon as possible, so you have the opportunity to beat it. And so, yeah, we are totally drawing the conclusion that the fact that Donald Trump is spearheading a lawsuit that has the capacity to damage these very same social media networks immediately began to manipulate the algorithms of the social media networks. Look at Indict Trump. Don't look at the lawsuit. No. Don't look at that. Look at Indict Trump. I mean, it's the oldest, it's the magician's trick. I'm going to wave my right hand around and be all flashy and showy. Well, it's actually the left hand that does the trick.
Yeah, and like, another thing that I want to make sure everybody's clear on, because I think I started to talk about it a minute ago and then we got pulled off. But when Trump was running, he mentioned that you'd be stupid not to take advantage of all the deductions and abatements that are made available to you in the tax code. He also made it a point to say that it should not be the case that is the case, that the tax code should not work that way. You'd have to be stupid not to use the tax code the way that you're required to use it by law, which is to correctly report your income and your liabilities and your revenue. But it should not be that way. Basically, he said that he had to do it the way that the law requires him to do it. And the things that they're accusing him of doing is that of using the law the way the law is written. This is one of the problems, not just with the tax code in America, but the law generally. Every one of you watching this show right now is vulnerable to prosecution for the commission of a felony, because the law is so large and so complex and so vague and so grotesquely open to interpretation that things that you think of as being just normal day-to-day activity, if observed, reported, prosecuted, and tried by exactly the right combination of people who understand the world differently than you do, you could be committing a felony just in your normal day-to-day activity. The law is an unwieldy and unresponsible son of a bitch. I am a rule of law guy, but the rule of law, the law which rules, should not be a law that you cannot understand. The Constitution alone is sufficient law.
Yes, and we are way long.
5-10 minutes. 7 minutes. Split the difference. All right, we are. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope we got that point across. Indict Trump is trending because Twitter is afraid of the lawsuit and they're trying to hide behind some bullshit drummed up political charges. And I think that's not only amusing, but it's quite telling. And I really hope that what we've just done today is really just a prelude to a future Toter Win Thursday. Y'all be safe out there, and we'll see you tomorrow morning for Firearms Friday. You'll be with us tomorrow, Cameron?
Should be, yes.
Hell yeah. Later, guys. Y'all take care. Oh, and make sure you like, share, and subscribe.